And please stand, if you would, in honoring of hearing of God's Word as I read Matthew 28, verse 16 through 20, the ending of Matthew. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. It's the word of the Lord. Please be seated. Either you don't know or you don't care. Either you don't know or you don't care. Now, I first heard those words as they came across the gold tooth of Drill Sergeant King. As many of you know, I went into the Army a little bit later after college. I had been out of college a while. Drake was about a year, so I had to go to Officer Candidate School. But before making it to Officer Candidate School, you have to go to real basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia, home of the infantry, the airborne rangers, all that stuff. So there, Drill Sergeant King, I'll never forget it because he's leaned all the way up against my forehead, and he's saying these words, either you don't know or you don't care, which is it? Now, you're not going to answer the question, because whichever way you answer it, it's not going to go well for you, right? You don't know? Well, then it must be because you either didn't listen, or now you're saying he's not good at explaining and he's not good at his job. So you're going to pay. But as I've left maybe the Army and my kids have gotten a little older, I've kind of found there's some real truth to these words. Either you don't know or you don't care. So I found myself asking my children this question, right? Either you don't know or you don't care, which is it? But what I've also often figured out is that many times the answer is they don't know, and it's not because they're not listening. It's because I've not been very good at explaining to them what they need to do. I haven't been very clear. I wasn't clear at all. So let's ask ourselves this question. Is the church today obeying Jesus' command, as we found here in Matthew 28, 18 to 20, which is to go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit? Is the church obeying that command, that commission? I would argue for the most part that at least in the West, we are not. We're not. We're not really fulfilling His command. Now, that's not to say that we aren't doing some good things and doing things, because the church is certainly doing things, and many of the things the church does in the West are very good. But fulfilling this commission, I would say we are not fulfilling His command. Now, we'll keep it close to home in the Southern Baptist Convention because we cooperate here with the Southern Baptist Convention. If we just look here at us in, say, Falls Creek. Falls Creek is the biggest youth event in America. I don't know if you know that. This is like the main thing for the BGCO. It's Falls Creek. They're proud of Falls Creek. Now, every year at Falls Creek Youth Camp, people from all over the country come, and they will release numbers every year. 4,000 decisions is what they'll release. Now, about half of those decisions every year, decisions to come and follow Christ is what they would say. 2,000, half of them will be rededications. So every year, half of the decisions are rededications, many of which were decisions from the first year or the year prior to make a decision to follow Christ. So we have a problem, right? This tells us we've got an issue. We've got a problem that people maybe are not understanding what it means to be a disciple of Jesus, to be a follower of Him. And so rededication every year. But we're so numbers driven that there's no change ever going to take place. Lord willing, there will be. But if things continue as they are, that's what it's engineered for. And if we take the numbers of Oklahoma Southern Baptist, we have about 700,000 members. But in church on Sunday, you've got about 200,000. So where are the rest of the people at? Now, if we go on from there to the national, the SBC reports 15 million members. But on church every Sunday, there's about 5 million people in church on Sunday. So my question is, where are 10 million people? And why is no one asking this question? See, if we're talking about disciples, right, these 15 million have supposedly been baptized. Said they made a profession, they've been baptized. But are they really disciples? They no doubt did something. I would argue it's closer to the 5 million that are disciples. So we've got some problems here, don't we? We aren't really fulfilling the Great Commission. Now, while many people are quick to blame the people in the pews, this seems to be, I think, the trend today, to blame the people in the pews. It's their fault. They're doing something wrong. I think the people that need to absorb a lot of the blame and take a good hard look are the pastors and the leaders. The pastors and the leaders are the ones who are going to be held accountable to Christ when He returns. Do you realize that? In a different way than you will, pastors, when Christ returns, will give an account for how they have led Christ's sheep. They're His sheep, not pastors and leaders. They're His, and they'll give an account. So when I look at it through this lens, I ask myself this question: either we don't know or we don't care. And I think, unfortunately, when it comes to leaders, the answer has to be, I fear many don't care. They know what is said here in Matthew 28:16-20, what the command is. Jesus is clear what His commission is. There is no way to misinterpret it. But it's not easy to make a disciple. It's easier to make a decision. It's easier to fill up a church with people. It's easier to produce something which will create a desired result at the end, which we report as decisions, and report these numbers, and be obsessed with these numbers, and pat ourselves on the back. It's easier to do all that than to make a disciple. And there'll be account for this. But church members don't escape all of the blame today. While most of it is laid at pastors and leaders and elders. You can't escape it all because it's the church people's responsibility to hold pastors accountable. That's what it means to be a church member. You hold each other accountable, and part of that means the leaders are held accountable. And we have God's Word. We live in a time where God's Word is available in so many different versions and translations and online. So the people can't escape this either. You can read and understand clearly what is said here in this text. So either we don't know or we don't care. Now, my purpose today is very simple. I want to walk you through the Great Commission in this part 2. And I want to remove this excuse, we didn't know. So that after today, after we move through this text, we can no longer say, any of us, that we did not know. And as we looked at this text last week, we saw, what we said is there's going to be 3 keys. There are 3 keys to unlocking the missionary potential of the church. They're here, they're in God's Word. And key number 1 is to rely on Christ's authority. That was last week. This week it is obey Jesus' command. To obey His command. Now, I can't make you care, but I can show you what's here and call you to obey. Now, some people are uncomfortable maybe being talked to directly, like you, using the word you. But you could be assured that I preached the sermon to myself all week for 6 days. And so I'll use the words you because now it's your turn. So that's what I want to do today is I want to show you first, kind of in 2 parts, what is it we're to obey? Right, we have to know that. What is it we are to obey? And then we'll look at how is it we obey this. How is it we will obey this? So it's generally broken down into those 2 parts, but there'll be some subpoints in the second one. Now, the context is vital, as it always is in coming to any text, especially when we take a break and, instead of preaching all the way through Matthew, we just jump in on the end here. So the context, it's vital to understanding the Great Commission. We can't understand the Great Commission and even the great honor that it is to have been given a commission to live on this side of redemptive history and be the ones taking this out into the world unless we understand the context of how it comes. Now, Matthew's Gospel, the Gospel of Matthew, it begins the New Testament. And it begins with the words, remember, this is the genealogy of Jesus, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And right off the bat, he's trying to tell us something. What we're encountering in Matthew's gospel is the fulfillment of these promises made in the Old Testament. Right, so God is doing a work in all of creation. Think of this as a gigantic story of God unfolding through history. It's a story of His acts in the world in reversing the fall, the curse of the fall. And He's made all these promises. He promised Abraham, through your seed all nations of the earth will be blessed. He promised David, someone's going to sit on your throne forever. They'll have a kingdom without end. And then the prophets come along speaking about this mysterious figure, this Messiah, who will have a kingdom that encompasses all of creation. All of the nations will return to God. So all these things. And then Matthew's gospel begins, and he presents to you Jesus, the fulfillment of all of these promises. The kingdom has arrived, and Jesus comes preaching the kingdom in Matthew. His healings, all of these things bear witness that He is reversing the curse of the fall. And then something happens. He's arrested and crucified. And it says, what's happened to the story? Is it failed? Has God failed? The disciples scatter. But then the twist, there's this big twist in the story. Christ is resurrected from the dead. And the disciples have been told by the women who discovered that Jesus was resurrected to go to this mountain. And this is where, in Galilee, they encounter Christ. And they encounter Him and they receive this commissioning. Now, when He first walks up to them, verse 16 through 18, when we went through last week, we saw that we have a clear need to understand Christ's authority. Some of them hesitate. Right? They've seen Christ alive, but yet some of them hesitate to fall down and worship Him. Others worship, some hesitate. They're unsure. And they would probably have remained unsure had He not given them this statement of authority. He's going to send them out on this commission. He's not just going to send them out, He's going to front-load it with the statement of authority. And that's what He gives them. He gives them assurance by His authority. All authority in heaven and on earth. That's every sphere. We understand authority and how it works in our lives. Someone has authority, they're a principal, it's in this sphere. You're in the military, you're in command, you have authority in this sphere. And Jesus comes and He says, in heaven and on earth, this is the sphere. Everything. All of creation. If there ever was a multiverse, everything in those multiverse, in all of those universes, everything, every possible sphere, He has all authority. And this is from Daniel 7, the prophecy of the Son of Man. He will be given a kingdom without end. It will encompass all things. And so He assures them in this, that He reigns supreme. And He's sending them out as ambassadors of a king who reigns supreme. And that's how He assures them. And then He shifts. And that makes all the difference in the world, doesn't it? He shifts to our text today. Having that authority backing you as you're sent makes all the difference. We can't go out on our own. But we can still not obey His command, even if we understand that authority, even if we feel bold to go in that authority. We can still be disobedient if we don't actually do what He commanded to do. All right, if we do something else other than what He told us to do, we can still be disobedient. So that's why this text today is important as we now look at the command itself. What is He telling us to do? And then how do we do what He's telling us to do? So that's what we'll see today. So first, that's what I want to show you. What is He telling us to do? So how do we obey? Or what is it to obey, rather? Then how do we obey it? All right, so number one, Jesus commands us and commissions us to make disciples. Okay? Make disciples. Therefore, in light of all this supreme, all-encompassing authority, He wants us to do something. He commands us to do something. What is it? It's make disciples. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations. You know, when I was younger, I really wasn't very interested in school at all. And I especially hated English class. I hated it. You know, the teachers, the nouns, the adjectives, the adverbs, and they would go through their things. To me, it was just, this is not worth paying attention to. I don't see how this is going to benefit me in life in any way. So I would just tune out. You know, I'd start playing with my fidget spinner, which the original is just a pencil. So I can save you about $30. You can just teach your kid to flip it through their fingers. It's the original. Or I would turn a pen into a spitball, thing or whatever. Or just daydream about baseball or go to sleep. Angie could verify that for you. or just go to sleep. I was not a good student all the way through high school, even through college. I just went to play baseball. And I especially did not like English, so I checked out on English at a young age. And then one day it came back to get me. It came back to get me. When I left the military to go to seminary, I discovered pretty quick that God had communicated in written form, we understand that, and that the way He communicated in written form was in adjectives, adverbs, nouns, and things like that. And I found myself in trouble pretty quick because I had to take a year of Greek and a year of Hebrew. And so I come into class, and here's the teacher. Dr. Huggins, he's talking nouns, he's talking adjectives, he's talking adverbs, and then he goes into participial phrases, and I'm like, I don't even know what's going on now. And I know I'm in trouble. So I get a book. I go to Barnes & Noble afterward, and I just get an English for Dummies book. And I read that whole thing, and then I have to get another book and how to write. And so I think much to everybody's surprise, including myself and Angie, I was able to recover. And I made an A in both of those classes, and all 6 hours each. But I really paid the price. God may forgive you of your sin, but you're going to pay the price still in this life. And why do I tell you all that? Well, because we're about to talk about some nerdy grammar words. That's what's about to happen. Now, they're important so that we understand what the command actually is. Because sometimes we can think the command is go. And we're like, let's go. Let's get it. And what do? Who knows? Something. But the way God has given us His Word is He's given us this command really with 4 verbs. And you know verbs. If you're here, you're a kid, you learn these. These are action words, right? Drake ran the football down the field. He's running. And so one of these verbs, though, is different. It's not like the other verbs, and it tells us what we're to do. You see, it's in the imperative mood. And the imperative is like a command. It tells us this is the verb, that's the command. And these other verbs that are here, they really are just describing how it is that you do this one that's driving the whole thing. And the one verb that is in the imperative is make disciples. It's a non-negotiable. That's how it comes. It comes in the imperative. An imperative is a non-negotiable. It's not, this is Jesus' great suggestion to you. It's not, hey, guys, I've got a really good idea. I think you should try to do this. It is not the one activity the church can get to after it's done doing all of the other things that we like to do. It's the Great Commission. It comes by divine command from supreme authority. And it's make disciples. That is the command that's to be obeyed here in this text. Now, a church could do 100 things, 1,000 things. It can do many things that are good, but if it doesn't do this one thing, then it's not an obedient church. And that leaves us with the question then. If this is the one that we have to do, what's the obvious question? What's a disciple? What is a disciple? A disciple is, it can be easily defined as someone who learns from and adheres to the teaching of someone else. It's a follower. It's someone who learns someone else's ways and does them and incorporates them. In the springtime, here, kind of in the South Bible Belt area, baseball is still kind of big. And every spring, you will see a lot of disciples all over the place. On Saturday mornings, everywhere. They'll have kids lined up. And these little baseball players, they'll be doing exactly what their coach tells them. They'll be paying attention. He'll tell them instruction. He'll show them what to do. They'll execute it. They'll do it. And they'll do it week by week, day by day. And that's a disciple. Someone who learns from and does something like someone else tells them. Hold this bat this way. Stand in the batter's box this way. They hear the instruction. They see it. They then incorporate it and begin to do it. They're following. A disciple of Jesus then. What is a disciple of Jesus? Someone who learns His ways. Someone who hears His words, obeys them, incorporates His words into their life, follows his instruction, patterns their life after his life. That is a disciple. Jesus says, cast off your old life. Turn from your sin and follow me. And the disciple says, I'm here to follow. Jesus says, love me more than you love anyone else. And the disciple says, I love you, I'm here to follow you. Jesus says, you cannot be my disciple unless you take up your cross daily. That is, be willing to take up this cross, go on a death march, and die to follow me. You can't be my disciple. And the disciple says, here I am. Where do I go to die? I'm ready to follow. A disciple is a follower of Jesus. It's one who obeys his words, learns his ways, conforms their life to the pattern of his life. That's a disciple. Now, what does a disciple look like then? Well, we could probably do many different sermons on that topic. What does it look like? Here's two very simple ones that I think are obvious that we must know. If we don't look this way, maybe we're not a disciple. In John 13:34-35, Jesus says this, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you're my disciples, if you have love for one another. So there it is. Very clear. He doesn't tell you, hey, if you want to know who's my disciple, find out who has memorized all of the New Testament, right? Who is really good at theology, who's not afraid at all to go and share the gospel. None of these things. Here's how people will know. If you love the other brothers, if you love the other brothers and sisters, the other disciples, if there is a love between these people, people will see and they will know they're followers of Jesus. They're his disciples. But also a disciple is a servant. I think there's no way around this either. The night that Jesus was betrayed in John, he records something that is totally culturally inappropriate even, unheard of for a leader to do. Jesus takes on the position of a slave. This is what he does. Right? Only slaves would do what he did. And he washes his disciples' feet. Listen to John 13:12-17. When he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you also should do just as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. What is he saying? Is he saying, hey, literally we had to have feet washing ceremonies? It's not what he's saying. He's saying that I came as a servant. He has supreme authority, remember, the creator of all things. And he's washing these people's feet. He's setting the pattern. If you are a disciple of Jesus, the pattern of your life will be that of a servant of other people. You'll be a servant. You won't be a consumer. You'll be a server. This is the command to be obeyed. Multiply yourselves, make disciples. A disciple looks like someone who loves the brothers and sisters and is a servant to others. At a very bare minimum. And making disciples is different than making decisions. Or filling up seats with church attenders and feeling like we've accomplished something. Both of which are easier to do than to make a disciple. Which is why I would argue that's the direction that the church has gone. Everything in the church, in the Western church today is perfectly geared and structured and organized to produce what we're producing. Which is not producing servants of others, but producing consumers. We produce consumers. That's what the church is really good at doing. They're not followers of Jesus, right? They are followers, but they're followers of the culture and of the way that the world is going. They'll stick their finger in the air, and that's the way the culture goes. That's the way they will follow. Making disciples, it's different than making decisions. And here's a big difference, a way that you could understand. Okay? A It's not so much going on now, but every once in a while you'll see it pop up, right? You'll have some stolen valor. There'll be some guy somewhere. You'll see it on Facebook. He's got a uniform on. He's got all his awards on. And, of course, he's always, expert at everything. And someone will confront him. Some real soldier or Marine will confront this person. It's obvious, right? They may have put on the exterior. They may say they are this. They may look like this. But if the time of testing came, can they do land navigation? There's no chance. Can they even fire their weapon, the most basic thing that any person serving in the armed forces should do? They can't fire a weapon. Under examination, we find out that this person has just made a profession to the world. They are something, but they aren't. That's what the church is producing today. That's what we are putting out into the world. We're putting out imposters, false disciples. And that's the way the church in the West has set itself up to produce this. And part of the problem then becomes that not only do these people then come into the church as members that aren't really disciples, they then get in positions to run the church. And not only that, some of them are actually leading the church from the position of the pulpit. They are the pastors, the unconverted ministers. It's not a new thing. George Whitefield was pretty much banned from the churches of England because if he ever got a chance to preach in your church, he might tell the church that you're not even a Christian. And he was not allowed in anymore. And he was right. And so today, this is the issue. We face this problem. We're doing things. We are making some type of disciple, some type of follower, but are we making disciples of Jesus? Are we making His disciples? And this is the command that we can't escape. If we are to be obedient, we are to make disciples. A follower of Jesus. That's what we're to do. Okay? No longer can we say we don't know. We are to make disciples. That's number one. Number two, how do we obey it then? How do we obey? And here's how we obey. There are three things to do. They're the other verbs. They tell us how to obey this. These three other verbs, they tell us, go, baptize, and teach. So let's go through these. Now, don't think that these are negotiable either, just because they're not the main one, the main verb. Because they're supporting, you can't just pick and toss a few out. They all, though not in the imperative, they can't be disobeyed because they're all part of the one command. The first is the church is to go to make disciples. To go. Now, going implies intentionality. It implies planning, and it implies effort and even struggle. This is not a passive thing where we sit back and we just hope that people will eventually come around and come to us. We'll just let this thing happen organically. Just be a good citizen, and it'll all work out. Okay? This is not. You have to put yourself in the mind of these 11 disciples. The entire world is against the message they're about to take out. Going implies intentionality, purpose, planning, direction. They're going to face resistance that they'll have to push back against and not cave and give up. It's like the resurrection of Jesus. You probably have heard this before. It's like the landing on Normandy. It was over when that happened. When that was accomplished, it was done. There was a lot still to be fought before the end came, but it was pretty much done once that was accomplished. But there was still a long struggle all the way to the end. That's where we find ourselves. Christ has accomplished all of this. He has the authority backing us, sending us, but there is the struggle of going. We have to go. Now, where are we to go? Verse 19 tells us, where do we go? We go to all nations. We're to go to all nations. That's been God's plan from the beginning. He's a God who has His eye on the nations from the very beginning of the Bible. When the fall happens, and we see Him work and call Abraham and make these promises, they're to the nations from the very beginning. And Christ sends us out into the world to take which is rightfully His. That's how you should view the Great Commission. This is like a conquest by the proclamation of God's Word, by His gospel. And that's been His plan from the beginning. David will sit, his descendant will sit on a throne that encompasses all of the nations. His reign will be supreme. We're to take this gospel to all nations. Now, all nations can be translated as people groups. You should know that. A people group. The International Mission Board, which is our mission board in the SBC, it's one of the things that we do really, really well as Southern Baptists. I heard, I was knocking us, which rightfully so. The IMB does some really great things. So here's their definition of a people group. A people group is the largest group through which the gospel can flow without encountering significant barriers of understanding and acceptance. So think languages or think cultures. And you can have cultural changes in a single nation. So a people group is more what Jesus is speaking to. We know from Revelation, peoples from all nations, languages, peoples, they'll all be there. Now here is kind of I think the neat thing about what the IMB has done. They've identified all of the people groups as best that they can on the earth. There's 11,747 people groups on the planet. And I'm thinking, that's already a good start, right? They know who we got to go to. Of this, there are 7,033 people groups that are considered unreached. Now, an unreached people group, that's less than 2% evangelical in that population. So we're involved in the St. Petersburg church plant. That's something we just decided that we were going to do as a church. St. Petersburg is, I think, around 8 million people and around 1,000 Christians. So they're an unreached people. And we will probably go there next summer, Lord willing. But we're involved now, praying for them, sending them resources. And thank God that's going on. But look, still, there's 3,203 people groups that have never heard the gospel at all. Unengaged and unreached people. They've never heard the gospel. No one's ever taken the gospel to them at all. One of my friends in Kansas City last year, it was pretty amazing to see. But they identified one of these groups, and they were the first people to go there and take the gospel to them. And their plan is eventually to send a family there to stay with them permanently. And because of technology and all the information we have, we can find these people. We know where they are. We can pray for them. We can send people to them. Like I said, this is one of the great strengths of being involved in cooperating with the SBC. They're purposeful about this going. They're planning. They're putting resources toward. They're making strategies to go so that all the earth may hear of Christ. Jesus, He commissions us. His command is to go to all nations. But it's not just to go to all nations, and this is not just a missionary thing that's out there. In Acts 1:8, it's the famous verse that tells us how does this take place. And this is what it says. This is Christ as He is sending the disciples again. But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in Judea and Samaria and to the end of the earth. So how do we understand what He's saying? Well, it would be like He's saying to us in Cache, in Lawton, Fort Sill, Elgin area, in Oklahoma, in America, and to the world. Right? Every church has the responsibility to make disciples and to try to do work towards evangelizing all of those areas. It can't just be, hey, we got everything in overseas missions while we ignore what's right here in front of us. We have to be about making disciples right here. So we are to go. We're to be intentional about making disciples. Okay? That's how we obey. We obey making disciples by going, by doing it on purpose. It's intentional. But also we obey by baptizing disciples. Baptizing is the next verb here that we encounter. What is baptism? Then that's what we need to answer if we are to do this. Now, before we answer that question, we need to maybe get in our minds what would occur. The disciples would go out preaching the gospel into a culture that had many different gods, and they would go preaching. That's all they had was the good news of Christ. Some people would hear the call. Repent of that life. There's only one God. Repent of following that God. Repent of doing the things that you're doing, the things that pagans all do. Turn from your sin and come to Christ. He's the only God. He died on a cross for our sins. He was buried. He was raised on the third day. Come to Christ. Repent and believe the gospel. Many people think that's foolish. Paul tells us that. They think that's utter stupidity. They think that's foolish. The Jews stumble over that. But many people convert to Christianity. They convert. Now what happens? They hear this message. There's a conversion. What takes place? What is a Christian conversion? Because we see that it is not until these people convert, they then take them and baptize them. Well, think about a conversion like this. You guys know what a conversion is. It's not a word we use a lot, but let's say if you have a grill at your house and you're running it on propane like most people do. And then for whatever reason, you say, I'm going to just brick this thing in and make it permanent. And I'm going to make it run on natural gas. So you buy a conversion kit, right? You'll change the hoses out. You'll take the nozzles and change them out. You'll change the burners. You will have changed out all the parts of this grill and converted it to running off of natural gas. Or maybe you could think of it like this. All right, say you've got an AR-15 and you then decide, well, now it seems like guys are paying attention, like they're in. We're in the Bible Belt. That's where we are. So you take this and you want to say, I want this to run 7.62, right? I'm going to check the size, right, for the ladies. You've got to change out the barrel. You're going to change out the receiver. You're going to change out the bolt. You're going to change these things over. And now, hey, now you're running a different ammunition through this thing. You've converted it. Now here's Christian conversion. You ought to think about Christian conversion this way. Primarily something that is done to you. Before you can do anything else, God must convert you. He must remove your heart of stone, take this heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh, take away the desire for sin that you have, replace it with the desire for Christ, and then boom, then you go, and now the first thing you do, in instantaneous in time and space as we experience, you repent and believe on Christ. A conversion in this time, which we should model our conversions off of, means leaving an old life and taking a new life. That's a conversion. Now, here's what occurs. You worship all of these gods. You worship even the emperor. Now, all of a sudden, a conversion has taken place, and you're saying, these aren't even gods, I'm worshiping Christ. It's a dramatic conversion. There's a book recently released. The title of it is fitting. It's called The Destroyer of the Gods. The Destroyer of the Gods. It's a book about the rise of Christianity. Christianity destroyed every god as it went across the Roman Empire and as people left their idols to come to the living God. And that's what happens. Now, Christian conversion is going to cost you something. It's a work that God does to you, but then you make a conscious decision to leave this old life and to come and to turn and to live your life for Christ. This is what's occurring in a conversion. And how they know this is the real deal in the Bible times is that you will take baptism. You will be publicly baptized, and your baptism will be a declaration of your total allegiance to Christ and your refutation of all of these other false gods. This is what's occurring. And if you're a Jew, what you're saying to all of your family is, Christ is the fulfillment of all of the Bible. He's the Messiah, and you're identifying with Him publicly. Now, how would they do it? Well, baptism means to submerge or to plunge. And it's often used in many other writings, not just in the Bible, to dye a cloth, to plunge a cloth beneath water to dye it a different color. And so what they would do is they would take you into the public, probably in running water. That seems to be the norm. Everyone could come and see what is happening. And when you then go beneath the water, you are saying that you have died with Christ. It's a public identification with Him. When you're raised up out of the water, it's a public identification with His resurrection. You're raised to walk a different life. The conversion is as drastic as leaving an old life and taking a new one. And so people would do this, and sometimes it would cost them their life. If you were a Roman and you took public baptism, you may come up out of that water and not live very much longer. Or if you were a Jewish person, you may come up out of the water and find that your entire family had disowned you. And Jesus tells us this is what we are to do. We are to go preaching the gospel, taking the gospel, and as people are converting, we take them and we baptize them. It's a public identification with Christ and His church is to be done in this manner in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Now, if you are taking the name of a person, that is like saying you are swearing total allegiance to that person. And Christ says to baptize in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. It's surprising today how many are professing to be Christians that all over the place that have never been baptized. Because it would be unheard of. In the early church, it's almost as if your conversion's not even complete until it happens. Right? The Bible doesn't teach salvation by baptism. It doesn't do that. It teaches salvation by faith alone in Christ alone. But you can rest assured that if you would refuse baptism, then there has been no justification. That you really don't know Christ. That you're not really a disciple. Remember hearing the story, I think one of the, it was Sergei maybe, the guy who linked us up with these church planters. If you remember, his dad used to be a Soviet Union tank commander. I think he told the story, I may not be remembering exactly right, but I think it was one of the first Christians in his family in Siberia. Everything is frozen solid. He converts to Christianity. And he says, well, I've got to be baptized. Well, everything is frozen. So he takes an axe and he cuts a hole in this frozen water big enough for two people to get in so he can be baptized. And they baptize him. That's a totally different mindset that what we have here in the Western world, where we'll get to it maybe if we get to it. Right? It's not that big a deal. After all, we walk the aisle and publicly profess Christ. Baptism. We aren't obedient to Christ unless we are baptizing disciples. That's the second verb. And now there's one more. So go, that's how we do it. That's how we obey. We baptize, that's how we obey. Third, we teach disciples to observe all that Jesus has commanded. This is the last verb. We go out into the world, make disciples, we baptize them, but that's not it. Right? It doesn't just stop there. We're to teach them Christ's words and His commands. But teach it maybe in a different way than we're thinking or we're used to, because the mission of the church is not just to transfer information to people. That's not the purpose. The purpose is not to make people really theologically or Bible smart. The purpose of this teaching is to impart a way of living, a life ethic. It's to teach observance to Christ's ways. So if teaching stops at the transfer of information, it has not been obedient to this command. It's teaching a way of living, a way of life. So think of it like this. Now suppose, everyone here can identify with this. You either have children or you've been a child, and your parents are teaching you something. Now let's say they want to teach you how to change the oil on the lawnmower. Let's say your dad was to take you into the kitchen and draw a diagram of the lawnmower and draw an arrow to the oil cap and to the oil filter and what a funnel looks like, and then tell you, okay, now go change the oil. That's probably not going to work. It's probably going to be a mess all over your garage, if they even get that far. Right? But if you go into the garage and you say, hey, come here, I want to show you how to change this oil. This is an oil filter. Here's the new one. Here's how we take this off. Okay, it's loose. You take it off the rest of the way. That's teaching to observe. In the same way, if your daughter has ever learned to bake anything, it would be insane to sit down and to have a diagram on measuring cups. And hey, here is what a bag of sugar looks like. Here's a measuring spoons. Here's an oven. Please go make some homemade from scratch cookies. Right? That would be probably a little bit dangerous, right? So you're gonna say, hey, I'm going to show you how to make homemade cookies. Here's a measuring spoon. Take it out. I want you to get 2 of those and drop it in there, 2 of sugar. And now all of a sudden what's happening? You're imparting teaching to observe. That is what we are told to do. We are told to teach people in this way, to observe a pattern of life. That's what Jesus has in mind, teaching to observe. Paul will often say things like this, and people think, well, how can he say that? Well, he says it because he knows this is the type of teaching that we're to have. In 1 Corinthians 11:1, he says something similar in Philippians 3:17. So he says, be imitators of me as I am of Christ. Now he's telling people, watch me, because I learned this pattern from Christ. Now you pattern your life after my life, and you'll be patterning it after Christ. You have a visual representation of how to be a Christian. Same thing in Philippians 3:17. Brothers, join in imitating me and keep your eyes on those who walk according to the example you have in us. That's how we learn to observe Christ's commands. And this is why it's essential in a church to rethink how the church does the things that it does, right? There shouldn't be total separation of young people from everyone else in the church. I remember I heard Paul Washer say one time, he said, the Bible only speaks about youth in bad terms. Did you know that? Youth are ignorant. They're slow to understand. They do really dumb things, on and on. So what do we do in the church? We take all the young people and we separate them from everyone else in the church, and we give them a young man to show them how to live. We give them a youth to teach the youth. So that's totally crazy. All of the people in the church, they need to see older people living after the pattern of Christ. Now, there are times where we will need to maybe separate people out for different levels of learning, but we ought not to totally segregate everyone out altogether. That's how we learn. And older people, you have to understand, you have a great privilege and responsibility to pass on a way of life, a pattern of living after Christ to others, and not just the parents, right? You have a responsibility to show my children how to live, and I have one to show yours how to live as well. So when my kid grows up, he can't just think, well, my dad was just kind of crazy. He's just kind of weird. Right? He just really liked Jesus a lot. But that's not really how most men live. He should never be able to say that, because there should be men everywhere that have the same desires and passions, and they're living the same way. So these are the ways that we obey. Okay, so today, that was my hope and my aim. I wanted to show you what is it we are to obey, right? Make disciples. Then I wanted to show you, hopefully I did, how do we do that? How do we make disciples? Jesus commands us to make disciples. We do it by going, by baptizing, and by teaching to obey. You ever heard of a perpetual motion machine? I really like these things. I'm showing you that I'm kind of nerdy, I guess. You know what I'm talking about? A perpetual motion machine. People, they try to make these things. It can be done with water. It can be done, with different spheres, and you put money in it, and you start the motion. And when the motion is created, of course, you have to generate the motion first. But maybe the water goes, and then there's a little turbine at the bottom. The water hits, but it's engineered perfectly to push the water back up the ramp and then back down, and it falls back down on the rotor. So once you make it go, it should go. What they hope to do is create one that will go forever. Now, they can't really do it because friction's involved, right? You're going to lose energy. But it looks like a perpetual motion machine. And really, this is what the church is. The church is a perpetual motion machine that Christ started when He commissioned the disciples. That's how you should think of the church. The church goes preaching the gospel. The Christ makes disciples, baptizes them. Then they teach these disciples to observe all of Christ's command, one of which is to go and make disciples. And they observe that, and now it starts all over again. And on the church has gone through history. But if we add a wrench to the system by not actually observing what Christ commanded, which is to make disciples, if we then have our focus shifted to doing many other different things other than making disciples, then the machine starts to grind to a halt. Right? And this is why we say the church has been today structured itself in a way that it's killing itself from the inside because it's not making disciples. Making decisions is not making disciples. A disciple is someone who makes a decision every day to follow Christ. It's a person that Jesus says, you cannot be my disciple unless you take up your cross every day. It's every day. Every day. And this is what we are to do. We are to obey this and not something else. And all we really need is that He gave the command. Why should we do it? Because He commanded it. It's really that simple. People ask me all the time, say, well, they like to make these straw men, right? You guys know I fall on this side of the Baptist sphere, the Reformed sphere. So what do you care about the Great Commission? I was commanded to do it. Do I need anything else? I don't need anything else. I was commanded to make disciples, so that's what we do. It's that simple. Remember this story I've heard of a missionary to India. His name was Dr. Wilder, and he got to go eat on this vessel, these naval officers. He was dining with these naval officers, and one of these naval officers asked him, they say, why don't you missionaries and you Christians, why don't you just mind your own business? Why do you think you need to come here and to bring this here to India? So he responded this way to this naval officer. He said, suppose you have orders to take this battleship tomorrow to Constantinople. Will you obey or not? And the officer says, well, if I'm ordered to go, I'm going to go. I have to take the ship where they tell me. And he says, will you go even if every sailor is killed? And he says, of course I'll go. I'll go because I've been ordered. And he says, then you're quite right. I will go because I've been ordered to go. It's really that simple. Go and preach the gospel to every creature. And so we go. Now, practically, how are we to do this? I want to give you what I think is, we could have tons and tons and tons of application on how to do this. Here's one just for our church, because we have so many children and so many babies and toddlers. We could change a lot of things just here over a period of time if we will make disciples of our children. So I'm asking you to take a different view. Right? There's a text in the Bible that says that children are like arrows, right, in your quiver. So you should think of your children as like a weapon that God has placed in your hands. You need to take that sword out and you got to sharpen it. And you got to polish it until it's a weapon ready to be wielded. And you only have a certain amount of time. You only have a certain amount of time. Don't waste that time teaching your kids to do things that don't matter. Don't waste it. It breaks my heart to see here in the Bible Belt in the West. You guys know my kids are well above average in athletics. And all of our friends, their parents are dedicated to making a baseball player or a football player out of their child, a disciple. They're discipling them. And if church lands on the same day, it doesn't matter, we worship on Sundays. It could be that they've decided to worship on Sunday nights or Saturday nights. If it comes into conflict with this other thing, the church loses. So what are they discipling? They're discipling them to be this. They're showing them over a period of time that the worship of God is not really important. It's teaching. That's just one example. But we have this great, I think, opportunity with our children, to begin to change things. So be purposeful about what you do with them. Do not live the rest of the week, the other 6 days of the week, as if whatever it is in your life, your work or your job is supreme. They need to see you leave church, and for the other 6 days of the week, see you live as a Christian, man or a woman. They need to see you encounter conflict and react like a man or a woman of Christ reacts. And that teaches them, I'm convinced, more than you sitting down and doing a short, small, little private time in your family. They need to know why it is that you have structured your finances in this way, because you want to give to missions, to see others know Christ. They need to know those things from a young age, that you have prioritized yourself in a way to where you have that to give. They need to know that that integrity is important, not because it can ruin your reputation in town and it can hurt your career or your business, but because you're a man or a woman of Christ. Integrity reflects the image of Christ. Right? If you love to keep a nice yard, it shouldn't be because you want your neighbors to see you have a nice yard and you're competing with whoever. It's because you're obeying the Lord in fulfilling the cultural mandate and to do all things well for God's glory. Right? All of these little things teach your children things. And we have to be intentional about the way we look at them. And so I'm asking that you would. We're not just here to pass on information to our children. Anybody can do that. We're to pass on a pattern and a way of living to our children. And we're commanded to go. We're commanded to go and make disciples, and it's really that simple. Jesus says, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. If you're here today and you have never counted the cost like that, that's his invitation. Would you be Christ's disciple? Then count the cost. Will you take up your cross daily to follow him? This Jesus, I told you, he's the resurrected Lord. He has supreme authority. Let me tell you that he died for sinners. And all of us here, you've heard us, we did our confession of sin. We all acknowledge we are not thinking we're better than anyone else that's not a Christian. What we are saying is that without Christ, we're totally hopeless. But we're saved by Christ and His work. That He died on the cross, and we have seen Him as our only hope of reconciliation with God. And that's what we would ask you today. To not trust in yourself, but to look and to see that God gave Himself over to the point of death on a cross. But they buried Him, and 3 days later He rose from the grave. He doesn't just rise, He rises supreme. He reigns supreme. And if you have never turned from your sin in this conversion which we talked about, which is the work of God in your heart, if you feel that He has drawn you to Himself, He's doing this work, you still must make a purposeful, intentional, willful turning from sin and turning to Christ. If you have never done that, I would encourage you today to do so now. To do it now before I even finish. Turn from your sin and turn to Christ. Make a decision to live for Him. I pray that you would. And after the service, I'll be available to talk to you if you want to talk about more information about what it means to be a disciple. Let's pray.